I'm playing in the Smogon Champions League, one of the biggest tournaments on Smogon where the best of the best compete in teams. But of the three major tournaments, the Premier League, the Champions League, and the World Cup, I've never won any of them. That's why this year I'm on a mission to get my first championship, this time as an NU player on a team known as the Technical Machines. Every week I play one best of one in the NU tier as my teammates play in other tiers and we try and make the playoffs. I won last week in week 1, but I face a new challenge in week 2. That's because the monthly tier shifts just happened. Pokemon are tiered based on usage, and Pokemon can move up or down a tier based on how often they're used. In particular, a lot of new Pokemon from the Teal Mask DLC have dropped into the NU tier. That means a lot of old Pokemon aren't good anymore, and a lot of new Pokemon might be. I have to separate the trash from the treasure and come up with a winning team to bring to the battle. This week I'm playing axrtix, who lost in his debut last week but is currently the #1 NU circuit player. So what's my plan? Entering the game, I had to decide what type of team I wanted to build. What was the best strategy to take advantage of all the new Pokemon? A lot of attention went towards high base stat Pokemon like Snorlax and Brute Bonnet, but I noticed something else that dropped to NU. Lycanroc had finally made its way down, and Sandslash, who was released in the Teal Mask DLC, dropped straight to PU, making it NU eligible. I wanted to make a sand team and use double Sand Rush to try and break through the opponent. Lycanroc is extremely fast already, and with a Sand Rush it means I outspeed everything, even the fastest Choice Scarf Pokemon. I give it a Life Orb and Swords Dance for power, and I already have one strong attacker. Then on Sandslash, I give it Life Orb, Swords Dance 2, and I give it Leech Life and Knockoff to hit Grass types and Bronzong respectively. But to make Sand work, you need a Sandstream Pokemon, and the only one available in NU is Hippopotas, the unevolved form of Hippowdon. The Sandstream Pokemon also need Smooth Rock for a Sand Rush strategy to be effective, so I can't use Eviolite. Make no mistake, Hippopotas is a liability and cannot otherwise compete in the NU tier. But my judgment was that the highs of a Lycanroc Sandslash core ripping through a team is worth the cost of having one of my team slots be a bad Pokemon. It was a trade-off I was willing to make. That was my offensive core, and through testing I was very confident in what it can do. Lycanroc and Sandslash can combine to destroy most teams. The key was now finding the best 3 supporting Pokemon for my attack. One obvious weakness is that the core is really weak to water and grass type Pokemon. That's why I added Shaman, a Pokemon who also dropped to NU in the most recent tier shift. Shaman's NU for a reason, but a 600 base stat is good. Seed Flare is a great attacking move, and its typing covers the water and grass type Pokemon I was scared of. Also, it gets an interesting support move in Healing Wish. If I want, I can sacrifice Shaman to heal up Sandslash or Lycanroc. After all, the only thing scarier than 2 Sandrush Pokemon is 3. But there's still a fundamental problem with the team. Sand offense works in batches of 8 turns at a time, and you need to find a way to go from Hippopotas to Lycanroc. If you take too long to find the perfect opportunity to bring Lycanroc into the game, then you've wasted too many of those 8 turns. If you charge in recklessly and switch Lycanroc in immediately, its low defenses mean it could faint on switch in. This is not a trivial problem to solve. How do you create a switch in opportunity that is both quick and safe? I call it the pivot problem. I solve the problem by giving the Shaman the eject butt item to hold. The idea is that Shaman has great physical and special defense and can switch into most attacking Pokemon. Shaman can switch into an attack and then eject button out into a Sandrush Pokemon, thereby protecting them. Shaman plays as an eject button pivot in the early game, a Seed Flare attacker in the mid game, and as a Healing Wish support Pokemon in the end game. Then I added an Intimidate Rocky Helmet Quillfish. Quillfish is my physical defender and uses the move Spikes to get hazards up. Quillfish is also relatively slow, so I can use it to tank a hit and then use Flip Turn to switch out into my attacking Pokemon. I also give it a Terra Ghost so that if I need to, I can block Rapid Spin. Slow Flip Turn isn't as immediate as Eject Button, but it's a good secondary way to try and solve the pivot problem. Finally, I needed one more Pokemon. I wanted a special defender who could complement Quillfish. I needed a way to switch into Tatsugiri and Gudra spamming Draco Meteor, but I also wanted a Pokemon that was good at attacking. I decided to round off the team with Assault Vest Grimmsnarl, giving me the combination of power and special defense that I wanted. It beats some of the top special attackers in the tier, and it's strong and has stab boosted Sucker Punch to fix its low speed. And that's the team. It's built around solving the pivot problem and getting your Sand Rush Pokemon in the game early and often. The battle starts and I immediately notice he has a Ditto. Ditto is a funny Pokemon. It's not that good. The reason is because Ditto copies your Pokemon and then with a Choice Scarf it outspeeds you, versus defensive or balanced Pokemon, for the most part that's pretty useless. A Choice Scarf defensive Pokemon doesn't do anything and you lose 1v1. Even if you do copy something worthwhile, the opponent probably has a defensive Pokemon that can switch in. You gain so much more by having a real Pokemon in that team slot. But there is one thing that Ditto does well: it counters really offensive teams. If you have a team built around sweeping, Ditto simply copies you and then sweeps you back. There are two reasons to use Ditto. One is that the metagame is really offensive, and this typically happens at the beginning of a meta before overpowered Pokemon get banned. The other reason is as a counter team pick when you're expecting someone to use a hyper offense. You gamble on the matchup and bet on fighting offense. If you do, you have a good Pokemon. If you don't, you have a terrible Pokemon. And guess what? He brought Ditto and I'm using offense. Ditto shuts down my Sand Rush core. It shuts down Lycanroc, my star Pokemon. Choice Scarf Ditto is quite literally the only Pokemon that can outspeed a Sand Rush Lycanroc. If I Swords Dance with my Lycanroc, which is what the team is built upon, I lose the game immediately because Ditto copies it and then reverse sweeps me. And to be clear, I don't use counter team as a derogatory term in this context. In a week-by-week tournament, it is normal to scout your opponents to see their tendencies, to see if there's any Pokemon or playstyles they prefer, etc. The goal is to bring the best team possible for the matchup. If you become too predictable, that's your own fault, and I walked right into it. From turn 1, I knew somehow, someway, I had to find a way to outplay the Ditto. To make matters worse, the other Pokemon were tricky too. They had a physically defensive Gligar with Eviolite who can try and take on my Sand Rush attack. Also, they had Scyther who counters Shaman and can take on Sandslash. But there is hope. As long as you have the fundamentals of speed, power, and hazards, you can outplay any matchup. That's why I like offense. Even if you have a bad matchup in theory, you can always try and outposition your opponent. My early game plans are to weaken Gligar and get hazards up. Let's get a Spike Up. Flip Turn's good damage, that's Water Absorb, Poliwrath. If we get a Spike Up, it'll help versus Ditto type Pokemon. Because really the key for breaking down like a physically defensive, the physical defense on their team is Gligar. So to break, that's the Pokemon we're targeting. Poliwrath kind of, but Quillfish kind of handles Poliwrath. The key we're really targeting is Gligar here. They also have Pokemon like Water Absorb Poliwrath, which stops me from freely using Flip Turn. We trade some damage and I find an opportunity. I wonder if they go Magneton on Gunk Shot. Let's get a Spike here. Yeah, they do go Magneton, which is why I didn't want a Gunk Shot there. Yeah, I don't want to be eating Volt switches. Flash Cannon's most likely coming in. Go to Shaman on Flash Cannon. We should live. If they're like Specs Analytic, we don't, but we should be living. I use the Magneton as a chance to trigger the eject button on Shaman. Now, ordinarily, here is where I'd rip off a Swords Dance and start blowing through the team, but I have to be more patient because of the Ditto. Instead, I settle for knocking off the Gligar and removing its Eviolite. We trade damage, but I think that this is fine. On paper, we're trading roughly equal amounts of damage, but I have Healing Wish in the back, and Gligar is what's holding the physical defense of his team together. I want to keep my low health Sandslash alive so I can Healing Wish it later, so I switch out. But my opponent makes a good play and U-turns out to bring in Hoopa. But what they don't know is that my Grimmsnarl is Assault Vest. They fire off a Choice Spec Shadow Ball into me, but my Grimmsnarl takes it on easily and is ready to attack back. And guess what? The Gligar was weakened earlier by Sandslash, so he has nothing that can switch into the power of Grimmsnarl. Either way, I'll crunch. If they go to Poliwrath, I'll play off that, because I very likely outspeed. They go to Magneton. 61. Defense drop doesn't matter too much. I get a free crunch and I knock Magneton down to low HP. He makes a predict and goes to Scyther as I Sucker Punch. There's a little bit of a back and forth where he revealed he has Bulk Up Poliwrath, but that isn't too threatening because I have a Quillfish and a Shaman. However, it is annoying because it has Protect to stall out Sand turns. But then he catches me in what's called a pin. U-turn coming in. Ooh, tough. This is tough. I think I might have to give up Sand Slash. I don't want to give up Sand Slash though. Tough spot. No matter what move I make, I lose a Pokemon. He's going to outspeed me and use U-turn on Shaman, and I faint. But if I switch out, he U-turns into Ditto, copies me, then knocks out a Pokemon anyway. It's looking bad, but I find one last resource. Terrestrialization. Do I Terra Fairy Healing Wish? Ooh, that's an idea. Ordinarily, you want your Terrestrialization to do big things. You want it to sweep your opponent, or you want it to stop your opponent's sweep. But that's not gonna happen here. I decide to use my Terrestrialization to faint. I want to get Sand Slash healed, that's my priority, and it's why I'm making an aggressive play. I kind of had to give up the Terra there though. I escape the pin by using Terra Fairy on Shaman to live U-turn. Then, in its dying breath, it uses Healing Wish to heal up Sand Slash to full. All of a sudden, I'm back in the game. I sacrifice Hippo for the final showdown. My last 8 turns of Sand offense remaining with still a Ditto left to beat. Stone Edge. Okay. They copy us now. We'll have to give up Lycanroc here, but that's fine. I have to give up my star Lycanroc, but then I'm right back in with Sand Slash. Sand Slash starts breaking through, even knocking out the Ditto, but that's not actually the goal. The goal is actually to set up Grimmsnarl. That's what I was playing for the whole time. From the very beginning, once I saw that Ditto, I changed my strategy. This is a Sand Rush team, but Sand Rush wasn't going to win. Instead, I wanted to slowly chip everything down for Grimmsnarl, knocking off Pokemon like Gligar, weakening Pokemon like Magneton. That's all for Grimmsnarl to come in late and try and win the game. We trade Pokemon and it sets up one final showdown. Grimmsnarl versus Scyther. My Grimmsnarl was built for this moment. 252 attack EVs and an adamant nature to boost its attack. All it comes down to is whether or not Grimmsnarl can beat Scyther. The moment of truth. If they have Roost, I think it's just over, but here we go. Oh! Almost came right down to 1% Scyther. And that's how it ends. Grimmsnarl barely misses the knockout on Scyther and I lose the game to drop to 1-1. As I would find out after the game, it was around a 50% chance for me to win that game. The Scyther had anywhere from 56.1% to 57% of HP, plus I had a chance to critical hit and a 10% chance to dodge dual wing beat. But that's the game. Our team would go on to tie the week 5-5, bringing our team's overall record to 0 wins, 0 losses, and 2 ties. If you're interested in this journey, make sure to like and subscribe, because if this video gets a lot of interaction, I know people are interested and I'll keep going and I'll do a video every week for the tournament.